So let's talk about another dynamic that, coincidentally, freezes us in place. And this is actually freezing reality. So the idea I want to talk about here is the freezing of reality, the freezing of yourself, the freezing of the dynamic of relationships, and the freezing of your potential. The process of taking a dynamically flowing thing and turning it into a static event. In the West, meaning Western civilization, America, North America, Europe, that kind of West, our perspective of life, it typically focuses on things and events. That's what we're focused on. We're focused on cars and sports events, things and events. Consumerism is about getting more things. Goals, events, having things happen that when we get to this one thing. In our brains, in our minds, what we do is we nominalize. And nominalizing is when you turn a process into a static thing. You freeze it. This is a term, nominalization. When you turn the process of two people interacting in a way where they start having feelings for each other, and those feelings change over time, and there's a dynamic, and you freeze that and you call that love. Love is not a thing. It is not an event. Love, if it is anything, is a process. It's something that happens over time, and it is always different. And if you love the same person for 20 years, every moment of that 20 years, that love will be slightly different in some way. It will have a different quality. It will be in a different context. It will always be changing. But we, over here in the West, we nominalize everything. We freeze it. We turn it into events. We turn it into things. And so this allows us to, in some cases, it has some benefits. It allows us to conceptualize things in different ways. But it also takes the dynamic out of it. Now, Alfred Korzybski, who wrote a book called Science and Sanity, he wrote another one, Manhood of Humanity. He was an interesting guy. He had this thing he called time binding. This is where a lot of these ideas came from. And in time binding, we take things that are happening over time and we make them one thing in our mind. So we might take a relationship that was a complex relationship in the past and we'll freeze it into one image, and that's the way that it always is, and that's the way it always will be. This leads to logic like, well, I was pissed at you then for good reason, and so I'm still pissed at you now. And we've frozen that thing, and now anytime we think of that person or that event, the pissed comes back up, and we're like, yeah, I still am pissed. We don't allow it to process. We don't allow it to change. And then ultimately what we do is we take these frozen things that we've created, these nominalizations in our mind, turning everything into things and events, and we start to identify ourselves with them. They become part of our self-image. They become part of who we are. If we won a football game when we were in high school and we were the quarterback and threw the touchdown pass, that's who I am, is that event. That event defines me. I am attached to that event. In the East, they have a completely different dynamic. Instead of focusing on things and events, they focus on the unfolding process. In fact, in America, when we say nothing, or in our Western culture, when we say nothing, we mean that there's an absence of a thing, that there isn't a thing there. Whereas in the East, the concept of nothing is not about the lack of something being there, it's about there is no thing anywhere. There are no things. I saw Chris Howard speak very close to here recently, someone I've been making friends with lately, and he said, physicists have estimated that if you took all of the matter on Earth, including the Earth, and you squished all the space out of it, that it would all fit into about a teaspoon. That's how much space is in there. I read one estimate that in an atom, there's as much space between the physical pieces as there is relatively in the solar system, between the sun and the planets. So when you say there is a thing here, we only mean that on one level, really. So this stage feels like a thing, but it's mostly space. It's just a little bit of stuff in there, if any at all. And so in the East, they really recognize this, and everything is part of a dynamic, part of a process, part of something that's changing over time. Our bodies, all the cells change over time. Right? A few years go by, almost all of the cells in your body have replaced themselves. Even the ones in your brain. What's going on? How is that possible? And even the cells have intelligence. Cellular level intelligence. They know what to do, getting signal with other cells to purify and cleanse themselves, what to do if they're attacked. They have a process all their own. Nothing freezes. It just doesn't happen. You can't stop your life. You can't press the pause button. And so thinking in terms of things and events can really jack your brain up, can really get you hosed up, as my friend Richard likes to say. Now, the world changes around us, other people change, but we don't want to. We resist it with everything we've got. And these processes of time binding, of freezing things, of nominalization, this creates a challenge, because if we freeze it in our mind and it stops becoming a dynamic process, then how are we going to deal with it in the real world as it's changing and moving all the time? Especially if it's something like a relationship or an interaction with a woman